Welcome to a special bonus episode of the Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning podcast. I'm Tom Orr. I'm joined by my good buddy Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony and I spend pretty much the whole fall talking about Ohio State football, but also watching every single Michigan game and talking about Michigan's games on Michigan Monday. And so we're going to do sort of an unofficial Michigan Monday here in the lead up to the national championship game against Washington, being played down in Houston. Tony, let's just get this just right off the bat. Talk me out of the fact that Michigan is an absolute lead pipe cinch lock to win this game and just run over a not particularly great Washington defense on Monday night. Talk me out of that if you can.
Generally, we don't embrace debate. We try, but it doesn't always work out that way. And I don't know that we can embrace debate here either, because this just seems like a situation where Michigan gets the very best possibility in terms of a matchup at the end. And I thought Alabama was going to be a difficult matchup for them. It wasn't as difficult as I thought. And this one, Washington, the way things have gone for them, sure, they've got a great offense, but just the way Michigan operates, I don't see things going well for the Washington defense or even the Washington offense.
Going into the college football playoffs on the whole, you had 4 teams, so you had 8 units, 4 offenses, 4 defenses. And I remember kind of looking through stuff statistically and going, oh, the Washington defense is like by far the worst of the 8 units in here. And they're particularly not great against the run. And what does Michigan like to do? Well, let me just refer you to the second half of the Penn State game for that answer. I feel like, Tony, they want to run the ball. And it feels like the interior of the Texas defensive line would have been a much better matchup against this Michigan offense than the interior of the Washington defensive line. I pulled up the College Football Nerds stats. They do basically a performance, how you do yards per carry versus the average team, how they do yards per carry against that opponent. And they have the Michigan yards per carry offense with by far the biggest advantage of any of the 4 units. Michigan's yards per carry offense against Washington has a 26% advantage. That is enormous. 15% for the Michigan yards per attempt offense over the Washington defense. The Michigan yard per carry defense also has an advantage. So Michigan has an advantage in 3 of the 4 possible phases of the game. And then Washington has an advantage in the passing offense, but only by 10%. 26%, 15%, 12%, all on one side, 10% on the other. I keep seeing people saying this is going to be a really close game. This is going to be a really compelling game. And it feels like maybe if Michael Penix plays the way he did in the Sugar Bowl, maybe. But Michael Penix's game in the Sugar Bowl was one of the best performances I've seen in quite a while from a college quarterback. I don't know how likely it is that he's going to be able to repeat that against what is a better Michigan defense than the Texas defense he faced.
Well, and I think they're going to need something like that from Michael Penix to be able to win this game. And I love Washington's receivers. This will be the best passing offense that Michigan faces by far, and their receivers will attack the ball. They will make their catches. They don't drop the pass. Michael Penix is an accurate thrower. However, he has to have time to throw, and that's where Michigan really decimated Jalen Milroe in Alabama in the first half. I think 5 sacks in that one. So the advantage there, if they can protect Michael Penix, which I need to see to believe, then we can talk about this being a possible win for Washington. But when Washington's defense has given up 4.4 yards per carry on the season, they've given up over 200 yards rushing a couple of times this year. This to me feels like a Michigan suffocation and a pretty boring game in terms of Michigan is going to run the clock out. Washington may have 3 possessions in the first half, something like that. If say Washington wins the toss and defers, you're going to see like a 15-play, 83-yard drive, and then maybe for Michigan, then like a 3-and-out with a sack in the first series for Washington, and then like another 14-play, 74-yard drive, And then it'll be like 7 minutes left in the second quarter when Washington is getting their second possession or something, where I just don't know how many possessions they're going to have in this game. So they're going to have to execute at a very high level with each of those. And I'm not necessarily seeing a high scoring game for Michigan, just an efficient and effective game. And they may not throw the ball in the second half. I'm going to assume they will, but this is going to be one of those where they're going to put the ball in the hands of their runners. They're going to do some jet sweeps, things like that, keep the ball on the ground and make Washington stop them and just run this clock out like nobody's business.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit like a Python game where they just kind of keep squeezing and keep squeezing and keep squeezing, and then all of a sudden you can't breathe, and then they keep squeezing and keep squeezing and keep squeezing. And one thing that I think is going to hurt Washington that we haven't talked about yet is I'm not expecting them to be able to be real balanced on offense, which I think is going to create more concerns with the pass rush for Michigan. Because if you're one-dimensional, then Michigan can just pass rush and they don't need to respect the run. Dylan Johnson, Washington's starting running back, injured his foot or re-injured his foot very, very late on his last carry of the game against Texas. And that ended up, because of the clock stoppage, making the end of that game a whole heck of a lot more dramatic than it probably needed to be. Washington got away with that one. Johnson is definitely not going to be 100% for this game. Supposedly he's going to be able to be good to go. I don't know how much he's going to be able to good to go. And if he does play, I don't know how much I'm really expecting him to be able to run the ball consistently. If they can't get 4 or 5 yards a carry there just to keep the Michigan defense honest, and I don't think they can, then you get one-dimensional. You've seen that happen to Ohio State teams at times in the past where they haven't been able to run the ball and they've gotten kind of one-dimensional, and what Michigan's able to do there. That feels like, on the Washington side, if Washington was a little more, had a little bit more of a run threat, it'd probably be a little more sympathetic to the idea that Washington would be able to move the ball more consistently. It just feels like if you're one-dimensional, even if you're moving the ball down the field, that's where you get into the red zone, and then you're kicking field goals instead of scoring touchdowns, and you probably only get to kick one field goal or so before it starts to become a you don't win games with field goals kind of game.
Yeah, and when you're not able to run the ball well and you're relying so much on the passing game, things can be going great, but it takes one sack to derail the entire drive. And when that happens in the red zone, that either forces a field goal or costs you a field goal. Like, now you're out of field goal range. So I think what Washington may want to do is do some max protect. If they're going to rely on the passing game, which they do, then give Michael Penix time. And like I said, he's got 3 fantastic wide receivers. Rome Odunze is arguably the best receiver in the nation. They'll tell you that on the West Coast. And matching up with Will Johnson, I'm going to assume quite a bit there will be a fantastic matchup. But he's far from the only guy. Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan, the other guys that get involved there, and they're all good. They all attack the ball. They're all strong. They can all do stuff after the catch as well. But to me, this just comes down to, in terms of Washington having offensive success, they need to give Michael Penix time to throw the ball. I don't know that they're going to run the ball well. Like you said, Dylan Johnson will figure that one out there when game time comes. But if Penix has no time to throw the ball, or is getting, if he gets sacked 5 times in the first half or 6 or 7 times in this game, Michigan wins really easily. Washington needs to protect him, keep him from getting sacked in order to win this game down the stretch in a close manner. And I don't know if they can do that, because Michigan, say what you want about their coaches and the way things have been handled this year, their coordinators, their coaches are really good. They come up with some really good game plans. They look for the areas of weakness, they exploit them, and they're just sound. Now, can Washington exploit the lack of talent on the back end? Because I think there is a lack of talent overall on the back end. Maybe, but they've got to stop the front end of that in order to find out.
Yeah, they've got to be able to protect Penix, and they've also got to be able to stop that Michigan run game, because it feels like if they are going to win, they've got to do it. They've got to win through the air, and they've got to win on defense by making Michigan go through the air, because J.J. McCarthy has just continued to win football games and turned the entire Ohio State fan base into Jesse Pinkman screaming he can't keep getting away with it, because the Rose Bowl was the first play of the game throwing a pick deep in his own territory where Caleb Downs happened to have his foot 3 inches out of bounds, which had nothing to do with the result of the play, but it ended up overturning a turnover. And then late in the game, in the game tying drive, the tipped pass that, anytime you get a ball tipped, you assume it's going to be intercepted probably. And instead it got tipped and somehow didn't flutter and kept going to Roman Wilson and ended up being a big game. And then, apart from J.J. McCarthy, the muffed punt that if it had gone 1 yard deeper into the end zone is probably a game ending safety. Michigan deserved to win the Rose Bowl, but Michigan also just barely won the Rose Bowl with a couple very lucky plays there. So both of those things can be true simultaneously. So if Washington can somehow stop the run, and I don't think they can, that's how you potentially get Michigan to an area where they have to throw the ball and they have to make plays through the air. I just don't really see that happening, and I don't think they're going to be able to score consistently enough given the pass pro, given the sort of one-dimensional nature of what I'm expecting from Washington's offense. I don't think they're going to be able to score enough to keep up with Michigan. And I think, as you said, probably a limited number of possessions. Prediction time, Tony. I'm going with Michigan 31, Washington 20, just to kick a couple field goals in the red zone. Michigan kind of limits the number of possessions, and just, the second half ends up, I'm sure the TV executives will hate it because it will be a long extended drives and not a lot of chances to sell pickup trucks. But I'm just expecting Michigan to get up, stay up, and just sort of strangle the life out of Washington. So 31-20 Michigan. What is your prediction?
How about 27-20? With maybe a late score there by Washington. But again, too many field goals going on. And I think Michigan is okay with field goals. Washington needs touchdowns.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Michigan can just sort of keep chipping away. Washington has got to make it count in their opportunities in the red zone. We will all find out together on Monday night whether they can do that. And then what happens after that? Oh boy, that's a whole separate conversation. But we'll have plenty of time to have that conversation at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle and at BuckeyeHuddle.com, of course. So hope you guys enjoy the national championship game. We'll have more Ohio State-centric coverage coming for you as well this week. Lots of Ohio State news on the coaching front, lots of Ohio State news on the transfer portal front, and much, much more as Ohio State shifts its focus already to the 2024 football season. Thank you guys for joining us. Make sure you hit that thumbs up and subscribe to this channel, hit the bell so you get notified, because we're probably going to have a whole bunch more shows coming for you this week and in the coming days. So thank you guys all for joining us. We'll talk to you next time.